Welcome to the Bringing Up Business podcast, where we talk about business and parenting. I am your host, Kayla Sachet, toddler mom and owner of a marketing and creative agency called Umari Digital. Now, dear listeners, before I introduce our guest, I have a question for you. Have you ever come across somebody who is so ridiculously talented and creative that any medium they tend to experiment with turns to gold? Whether it's pen to paper, photography, digital art, video, whatever, that person creates beauty and just has that it factor. If you haven't had a chance to meet somebody like that, then today is your lucky day. Today's guest is Jose Cotto, an interdisciplinary artist and designer from Great Brook Valley. He describes his creative practice as an exploration of relationships between people, place, and time, often integrating poetry, fabrication, architectural design, mark making, and lens-based media. Cotto's work has been featured by Paper Monuments, Prospect New Orleans, ASHE, Newcomb Art Museum, Antenna Gallery, and the Contemporary Art Center. He earned a Master's of Architecture from Tulane University in 2014 and a BFA in Design and Architecture from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, in 2011. Cotto is a Salzburg Global Seminar Cultural Innovators Fellow and was an artist in residence at the Joan Mitchell Center in 2022 and a studio in the Woods in 2022 and again in 2024. Prior to joining UTIL as Director of Community Engagement and Design Justice, he was part of the team at the Small Center for Collaborative Design in Tulane University's School of Architecture. Additionally, because there's more, I'm telling you, Jose is amazing, he supported the center's design and build envisioning projects, contributed to documentation and communication efforts, and led a yearly seminar focused on public space, public interest design, and interdisciplinary practices. Jose, I'm honored to get to hang out with you today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to dive in and see where the conversation goes today.
Same. I know you are going to have so much good stuff to share, especially in this particular time that we're at. But first, let's talk about your journey into design and parenthood. So which came first for you?
I feel like I've been a designer all my life. I can think back to when I was a young kid growing up in Great Brook Valley and building clubhouses in the woods with friends, with like scavenged materials that we would find around the neighborhood and around like nearby factories, etc. Always been inspired by artists and art. I have had family members who have been artists, their entire lives. And so art for me was always a way for me to kind of like tune into sort of my day-to-day realities growing up in a housing project, in the 90s when, in a sort of particular moment, like pre-digital world where things were a little chaotic. And also a way to kind of escape from those realities as well. So art and design have always sort of been these like tools, if you will, for me to kind of like radically accept and engage with sort of reality, but also find moments of respite and moments of pause to reflect and to dream, right? And to sort of imagine alternative possibilities. And yeah, parenthood is a much newer game to me. I've had younger siblings and cousins and folks that I've grown up around and kind of, have quote unquote helped raised, but it's not the same until it's your own child that you are worried about, 24/7. And so, yeah, I have a 2.5-year-old now, which keeps me and my partner busy and energized and all of the things. So yeah.
I felt that. My kid is 2 years and 3 months. And it's a lot. It's a lot. So he's only 3 months younger than your kid. And it's a lot. And it's always so funny to me when someone compares having a kid to having a dog or having a niece or a nephew. And it's like, in some ways I get it. I do get it. I mean, I play fetch with my toddler. I'm not gonna lie, and we have a great time. But there's a major difference. I mean, dogs are a lot more independent. Cats are a lot more independent if you want to compare other pets as well. And there is something about a kid it's a 24/7 job being a parent.
Yeah, and it's legacy, right? And
Hmm.
it's like future, right? And it's like both past and present and future, which, maybe I've never been a pet person, so like maybe folks feel that way about their pets, but like I can't imagine having a dog and sort of being like weighed down by like the gravity of like where will they be in 20 years, right? Like those conversations are a little bit easier to kind of navigate and sort of like ground yourself, right? Like there's a certain like expectation
Yeah.
and certain timelines that we're sort of familiar with, and all of that sort of goes out the window when you're a parent, right? And you're not you're thinking about your kids, you're thinking about your grandkids, right? Like you start to think about time in a different kind of way,
Yeah.
which has a sort of weightiness to it that is both grounding and paralyzing and also freeing in some ways, right? It's all of the things. I always say like parenting is everything all the time.
Mm,
It's like there's always something. And even in the moments where it's calm, like there's still these sort of like layers of just feeling and thinking and reflecting um that you would have never imagined of until that like initial moment where you actually meet your child. It's like that's the moment where like the floodgates open and you're made aware of all of these things that you've been carrying your whole life, and didn't have a reason to tap into.
ooh,
And then this little human comes along and gives you all the reasons and more to tune into that aspect of your being. So yeah,
gosh,
it's a lot. It's a lot. It's worthwhile, but it's a lot.
just so well put. I remember right after giving birth, they set him on my chest, and out of nowhere, I couldn't have predicted this. I just started sobbing. And I felt like it was a release of all of the emotion I had been carrying and all of the
Mhm.
weightiness, as you put it, of thinking about the future and preparing for this child and thinking about my kid's future 5, 10, 20 years from now. All of it came flooding out all at once.
Mhm.
And I just remember that moment being so overtaken by the weight of parenthood because it's visceral. It's a real weight because yeah, I mean you put it so well. When they're awake, it's a lot, and even when they're asleep, it's still a lot because now you're thinking about them.
Yeah, yeah, and there's no preparation, right? I mean, like I said, grew up around younger siblings, younger cousins. Like I've been around young kids most of my life. And so I was familiar with sort of, like behaviors and kind of trends and attitudes and milestones and these sorts of things. But uh, you know, it doesn't resonate the same as it does when it's your child. And, no amount of books or podcasts or, conversations with friends who are going through it can really prepare you for that moment of, you know, when you realize, okay, like this is nobody else's project, if you will, but my own and my partner, right? And like, yes, we have a support team. Yes, we have community. We have all of these things. And at the end of the day, we are still responsible for this life and responsible for nourishing it and cultivating it and allowing it to become what it wants to and needs to become, which is
Mhm.
also like a thing that you can't really prepare for, right? It's like we have this idea that like we can be controlling uh of things, and it's like it's really about trying to sort of listen and engage in a dialogue even straight out the womb, right, over on like who are you and who are you wanting to become and how do I help you get there.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that it's funny. I had a really close group of friends, maybe about 10 or so couples friends for about 12 or so years now, and there was like a 5-year period of time where at least one of the couples was like expecting a child.
Mhm.
It's like nonstop. There was at least someone who was expecting. And so, it's like I've been around it for the last, 7 years in quite an intense and like, personal way. But again, it's like there's no preparation until you're in it and you're sort of having to, uh, trust, just trust instinct and trust the sort of humanity of it all, right? Like all of us were wired to do this. And how do we how do we tune out sort of the noise, if you will, or the expectations of these kind of external voices and just like truly listen to like our intuition as humans and beings who have done this practice, if you will, for millennia. And so it's kind of a beautiful like thing to be able to unearth inside of us that we don't even always realize is there.
Yeah. 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 It's such an interesting experience because at least for me, some parts were incredibly natural and they came instinctually. Other parts were completely unnatural and just they felt like they were coming out of left field. I had no idea what to expect. Did you notice with your friends? So this was before you had your child. Did you notice with your friends, were they going through any sort of changes or maybe crises that caught you off guard as a non-parent? Were you like, "Whoa, what are these people going through?"
Nothing that's like jumping out at me. And I think part of that is honestly like I uh have always just been a believer in grace, and like, just acknowledging that like everybody's on their time, right? And so there's like a certain level of judgment that I'm always trying to avoid. And so, for me it was always more of just like, wow, like y'all are doing it, right? Like y'all are seeing friends who were artists just sort of figure it out, right? And like readjust their creative schedules and timing in ways that, where it's like you're creating at 2 in the morning now, it's like that's your 2 to 5 is like your creative window, but you make it work, right? And so just kind of seeing the ways in which people were able to respond and adapt, right? I think that adaptability is like that's like the parenting superpower, if anything, right? It's like the ability to be completely dialed in to move in one direction and then just be like, nope, you know what? We have to pivot. We have to do something else because this human being is requiring that. And I have friends who have had a lot of challenges. There's like health challenges, surgeries early on, a lot of those things, which are tough, to sort of like see folks have to navigate. But again, like having a good group of folks to be able to connect with and engage with regularly, having a strong group chat to keep the spirits going and just remind folks that all of us are sort of navigating has really sort of helped my experience. And like I said, we had probably a solid like 4 or 5 years between the first child being born in our close friend group and our child being born. And so and that was just that one immediate circle, right? And so we were able to kind of see a lot. If anything, it was more affirming and kind of grounding once we got to that point. But yeah, there was, I think, just like people's ability to adapt is really the thing that sort of jumps out at me or kind of comes to mind. And then the ability to like edit out, like edit things out of your life that just no longer serve the family unit in the same way, whether that's certain habits, certain desires to like be in certain spaces or places, or transitioning from like being in your 20s in a city like New Orleans that's like very vibrant and outgoing and very social to just being like, you know what, I'm totally cool with like being home all day every day, and just like spending this time internally. And so seeing people kind of adapt and sort of just again just kind of change certain patterns or habits just out of a desire to sort of connect has been a really like beautiful thing to kind of see and witness over the years.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a malleability that parenthood can teach a parent. I know for
So true.
me, I was living in the city. I had been there for a decade. This was in LA. And I remember a very specific conversation with my hairdresser at the time. And I was like, "Hey, I just need to let you know I'm moving and I'm moving over an hour away. I'm going to be closer to my parents and closer to my initial village, which means that because of the distance, I'm not going to be able to come to you anymore." And it was so funny. This was before I was pregnant, before I had my son. And she was like, "Okay, whatever you do, if you plan on moving back to LA, don't have kids. Don't have kids because you're not going to want to move back to LA." And at the time, I was like, "Oh, yeah, totally, for sure. I get that. And I do want to go back to the city. I want to get back to this life." But I moved. I actually really liked the slower pace and the readjustment in my life. Then we got pregnant and I actually became okay with being out in a place that isn't the city, that it isn't running 100 miles an hour at all times, which is the speed that I had been previously adjusted to. And it was interesting to me to be okay with that and to be able to just roll with this new reality and instead of bracing myself against it, accepting it and finding
Mhm.
the joy in it and finding the beauty in it, which I now so deeply appreciate this new reality for myself. And so yeah, that adaptability in parenthood is just so cool. As you put it, it is a superpower. I completely agree. Is there anything in parenthood that you would want to help prepare somebody who's planning? I know, like, there's nothing that could 100% be done to fully prepare somebody for parenthood, but is there any advice that you would give to a new parent?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just from my own sort of experience, I read the Birthing Partner book, which is like sort of like I think that's the name of the title. I know it's a book that's utilized by like a lot of doulas and folks. And like that was a really just kind of grounding and like straight to the point kind of book. It's like first chapter is like you're there, it's like this baby is coming, what are you doing? And so just in terms of like sort of wrapping my head around the process of how to support my partner through that process. My partner was a super champion, like wanted to have an all natural birth and was able to do that successfully with like really like no implications. So we were like super lucky on that front. She was able to have an experience that she wanted to have. And for me, speaking as the partner who wasn't carrying the child, like I think one of the biggest things is just like making sure that I was prepared to sort of support my partner and kind of, advocate for the things that she wanted, and kind of the experience that she wanted to have. And I think having that plan kind of going in is important to really think about like the details, right? Of like how do you want this experience to be? Who do you want in the room? Do you want to be the person that's like facilitating or talking to a doctor? Because like your partner probably doesn't want to have that conversation when they're in that level of pain, right? And
No,
so
they do not.
I think just being ready for that. So like on a kind of partner personal level, like those are some things that I would recommend. Like I think that book was great. And again, just having those conversations early and often and kind of like just running through the scenario just so you have some ideas. And again, it's never going to go as planned, right? Like we were in the delivery room thinking that we would have a few hours before anything would happen. And then it was like instantly the baby was coming, right? And like nobody was prepared. The nurses weren't prepared. There was no tools in the room. It's like we were just getting set up. Like the bathtub was still being filled up.
Wow.
And so you adapt and you pivot, but again, just having some kind of grounding there. And then for me, a lot of it was on a personal level, like a lot of it was just sort of reflecting and just thinking about like what I wanted to maintain for self and like how do I make sure that I'm I'm evolving into parenthood and not like becoming somebody else. And so like, that distinction of like evolution and not like total transformation or like embodying a totally different persona. And so I think that has allowed me to sort of move through the world with a certain level of intention and just kind of confidence that some of the decisions that I'm making or things that I'm trying to do, in particular when it comes down to sort of like impacting like the time that you have, and you're able to spend with kids, it's like making sure that you have some personal alignment on that front. Obviously, you want to be there, be a sort of supportive and present parent. And also you want to make sure that you're continuing to like nourish and feed the things that sustain you on an individual, personal, spiritual level. So for me, that was like really thinking about my creative practice, finding moments and opportunities to do that throughout the process, right? And so that I was like in a rhythm where it's like, all right, I have this 30 minutes, I can like exercise this muscle, and just kind of baking that into the day to day. And then, yeah, just giving yourself a lot of grace. Like I said, there's no amount of manuals or preparation that like can get you ready for that moment when the nurse is like, all right, you can go home now. Like you can leave the hospital and you're just standing there like, wait, you trust me to one, just you trust me enough that like my car seat is installed properly
Are you sure?
to
Do you need me to take a
to
test
even
or?
begin?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you know, do you want to like is somebody going to be in a car ride with us? That first car ride home afterwards was like it's traumatizing in a lot of ways. You know, it's like you have this like the most precious, fragile thing that you've helped create to date in the back of your car. Um, it's like you're like on hyper alert, right? Like you're so much more aware of how bad everyone is as a driver, right? Like everything
Yes.
is like magnified because it's no longer just your life and well-being in the car. And so just giving yourself some grace and just reminding yourself like, man, everybody, yes, a lot of people have gone through this and all of those people are like making up a different version of how to do this every time, right? Like
Hmm.
there's no singular approach to parenthood. It's going to be totally different. Everyone's going to have an opinion.
Yeah.
Listen to most of them and like follow few. It's
Right.
like receive everything you have the bandwidth to receive and apply the things that you know you feel really matter or you align with, you know, but
Yeah.
everyone's gonna have everyone's gonna have suggestions and thoughts and opinions and then you quickly realize that, you know, it's okay to do things totally different. It's okay to not be on the timeline that's in the book. It's okay to just let life kind of take its course and sort of be what it needs to be. Which is hard because like you wanna come out the gate being like I'm doing everything possible and correct, whatever that might mean.
Yes. That's definitely
And
where I got.
there is no correct.
No, there isn't. And that's where I found myself getting stuck at the very beginning because I had no idea what I was doing. I wanted people to spell out exactly what needed to be done. And a part of that was because my husband and I lost a really, really good close friend 2 weeks before our son was born.
Mhm.
And so we were navigating that as well. And I kind of noticed how we divvied up our energy. My husband was closer to that friend, and so he was almost solely focused on grieving. I'm speaking for him. He might say something different, but from my perspective, it seemed like he was solely focusing on just grieving. I hate that I use the word just there, by the way, because grief, there's no just tiny, any
Mhm.
minimalizing grief. Grief is a huge, huge thing. But he was
Mhm.
focused on grieving. I was focused on figuring out what the heck parenthood was about and motherhood is about. And it felt like we were living on two separate planets. You know, he'd be there physically in the room helping to feed me right after postpartum and making sure that I was nourished in that way. But emotionally, he was in a different space. And so we were navigating the newness of parenthood, which is a lot, and grief as well, which is just all consuming. And so it was, for me, that was a really, really hard time. Um, you know, zooming out, I wish that we had more friends checking in on us, like physically coming to our place and knocking on the door,
Mhm.
letting themselves in and just saying, "Hey, what do you need? How can we help? Like, let's cook for you, let's clean, let's just sit down with you and let you cry it out," like whatever it was. What were some things that your friends did to either support you or that you wish you had been supported with in those early days?
Yeah, I mean, we had friends. We definitely had friends that came by, right? And I was just in New Orleans again this past weekend. Met up with a friend who I hadn't seen in a while. And we were reflecting back on the fact that he just brought over like a whole roasted chicken with like vegetables and stuff one night. You know, just like so we had friends that did that quite a bit. You know, would bring us meals and just having other people to talk to, right? Like especially in those like first 2 to 3 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, when like both of us were able to have like, you know, a decent amount of you know, paternal leave, at least in those first 3 months. And like that first month, man, you're just like it's just the three of you primarily in the house, or you know, if you have other kids, you know, it's just like it's the family unit. And everyone's just trying to get to know one another, you know, and like figure out each other's cycles, figure out each other's rhythms, you're sort of like reaching the edges of breaking points over and over and over again,
Yeah.
and sort of like questioning, what bad decisions you made, 10 months ago to go on this journey. Because like I said, it's a lot, right? Particularly when uh you have there's a lot of complications, right? Or like there can be complications. I think in our experience, our daughter was not able to nurse in the ways that we thought she would, right? And then it was like a combination of all parties, right? Which is like just navigating those conversations can be really tough and challenging, right? Especially for the partner and the relationship that's doing that nursing, right? Like
Yeah.
when things don't line up or quote unquote work in the ways that we think that they should, it can be really really challenging, and you start to doubt self and question all these things that are beyond your control. And like we
Yeah.
were like literally feeding my daughter with a syringe for a period of time. It was just trying to get any little bit of like nutrients and sustenance in her, especially in those first 2 weeks, when they're naturally wanting to lose a little bit of weight, and like, it's like their bodies are in overdrive trying to like just catching them up to this new world.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it can be a lot, So we had friends that would come by. We would just have conversations. We had a few like dedicated friends that were like, very clear and like transparent with us around like, hey, if you need to call us, doesn't matter what time of day it is, we can be your emergency call. And we used it. It was like 12:30 a.m., 1 a.m. one night, on like Christmas Eve or something like that. And we called and they answered the phone, and just like having like a 1 hour conversation just to again just like ground ourselves and remind ourselves of the process. And they have a child who's almost about a year older than our daughter. And we were able to just like again just like have a reference point and a baseline, and just other voices in the house, like in our space, to just be like, no, you got this.
Yes.
It's like, you know just keep going. Like this is just like what happens. Babies just cry. That's what they do. That's how they communicate.
Hmm.
You'll figure that out. You'll start to like understand what the different cries mean. And so just like having dedicated number that we could call at any point in time was like a nice sort of security blanket for us to have, right? So yeah, just allowing the people that want us to be supportive, and also just creating some guidelines and boundaries for yourself too, right? Like I think everybody, oftentimes people are eager to engage and support, and maybe that can be overwhelming. And so like we made a decision that like those first 2 weeks, like we just wanted to just be our little unit, and like really, really there's some like, this was like COVID times, right? So like
Hmm.
there's always like these like little nuances,
Yeah.
like also just like being mindful of like sickness, especially before you have a proper visit and checkup and all of these things.
Yeah.
And so we created some boundaries around that as well, and let folks like just gave folks hours like, hey, if you want to pop in at any time during these hours, like just know that our door is unlocked. You're welcome to just like come in, hang out. Um, just keeping those networks active, and those lines of communication open were really useful for us.
Yeah.
Um, and then we did a lot of stuff before the baby came with friends too, right? Like we had friends come over one day, and we made pasteles, which are kind of like, it's like the Puerto Rican tamale, if you will. It's like we spent like a whole evening, like 4 or 5 hours, just like prepping stuff like a week or two before the baby came. And so it was like nice to share that time even before the baby arrived, right? With friends, just again, just to ground yourself, and um, just be reminded of the ecosystem that your child is going to be entering into, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's like a good motivator and assurance to like, yeah, like let's get this baby out here so that they can meet these people, right? That are so amazing and incredible and generous with their time and energies. And like that's the ethos and like spirit that we want our kids to move through the world with, right? To be there for friends in those moments. And so yeah, those are some of the things that we did. And there wasn't a lot that I wish people had done. If anything, it's just like don't ask what people want, maybe like just kind of offer what you can. and let people decide whether they want to receive that or not. But that extra decision making of like, ooh, what do I want to eat for dinner today? I don't know. It's like that extra decision is like actually it can be a burden
Right.
to
That's fair.
folks. And
That's
so,
totally fair.
instead of saying like, what do you want for dinner, to say, hey, I'm gonna pick up some pizza. Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
And if people are in the mood for it, then they'll be able to respond to that. But I think just trying to limit the sort of decisions that people are having to make so that they can just focus on being present for themselves and for the child was a big thing for us.
Oof, that is great. That's great advice. Yeah, there are so many decisions that parents do have to make, and please don't ask the parents what they want. Yeah, just
Yeah.
tell them like, "Hey, I'm bringing over the pizza, or I'm bringing over the soup or whatever it is." And yeah, do you want it or
Hmm.
not? That's the only decision. Yes or no. Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And now, a quick message from our sponsor. Looking to take your brand, team, or event to the next level with custom gear that stands out? Virtue Screen Printing is your go-to one-stop shop for high-quality custom apparel and accessories. Whether you're launching a clothing line, gearing up your staff, or repping your squad, Virtue brings your vision to life with custom hats, shirts, hoodies, socks, beanies, and more. We're not talking cookie cutter merch. This is premium, fully customizable gear made with care and attention to detail. What makes Virtue different? It's simple. Low minimums, fast turnaround, hands-on customer service, and a passion for helping brands look good. From bold designs to subtle branding, they do it all and they do it right. Visit virtuemfg.com to get started or hit them up directly for a custom quote. That's virtuemfg.com, where vision meets craftsmanship. virtuemfg.com. Thank you for staying with us, and back to the show. So let's switch gears a little bit. You are breaking generational cycles through design. And I imagine part of the fuel for your work in doing that is thinking about the legacy that you are passing down for your daughter and for the next generation. So what does it
Hmm.
mean to break generational cycles through design? What kind of work are you doing, and how are you doing it?
I think for me, to to start, maybe I'll start with observation, because I feel like for me, I kind of entered the design world or made a conscious decision to sort of be curious about the design world and the built environment, after sort of like having an epiphany moment in the neighborhood that I grew up in Great Brook Valley, where I was just walking to my aunt's house, and uh, for some reason I just like remember stopping at one point and kind of looking around and just taking inventory of what I was seeing around me, and in particular, like the families that were like in my view, right? And I was like, all right, like my friend and his parents live here, like they've been in this neighborhood for like 20 years. It's like this family lives here. They've been in this apartment for like generations, right? And I was like doing a quick scan. I was like, man, like he's a brilliant mechanic, amazing entrepreneur, salesperson, incredible athlete. And I was like, what is it about this physical place that doesn't allow that kind of greatness to transcend what this place can offer? And allow these people an opportunity to leave, right? Because it's like growing up, the housing projects for me was always like the goal. For some people, it's like the goal is to like rep your hood and like be in your hood, right? For me, it was like I want to get out of here. It's like this, uh, especially once I was like in high school and was able to like start to get little snippets of like life beyond, right? It was like there's so much more world out there, and what is it about this physical place that doesn't allow people the opportunity to explore and see and be part of that larger world? And so I started becoming a lot more critical of like just noticing the built environment, right? Like what is it about the material quality in this neighborhood, right? This is like a typical sort of public housing project built in the 40s and 50s, right? Like, a lot of brick, a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, these like materials that are really harsh and hard, a lot of hardscape, not a lot of green space, et cetera, right? Um, and I started thinking about sort of like, what is it about, like, what are the parallels between the physicality of this place and the ways in which people embody that in their own being, right? And so I started making connections with like my own behaviors and actions, and this physical environment that I was in, and how in some ways I was kind of like living up to the environment, right?
Mm.
And since then, I've just been curious about how people perceive space, how people exist within space, the ways in which our built environment is subtly and sometimes not so subtly like shaping and informing our perceptions of self, which ultimately shape and inform our perceptions of the world and what's possible, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work that I've done, especially in my earlier years, and a lot of the work that I was doing at the small center prior to joining UTO, like a lot of that was around engaging people in conversations about the places that they were in and trying to encourage people to just sort of like mount a different perspective for a moment, right? To be able to allow people to see things the way that I saw them, to encourage them to see things differently, right? This is how like how my photography practice like gets layered in, right? Like all of these things. And so I think like one of my goals is just to personally, professionally as an artist, et cetera, is it's really just to kind of like raise the collective consciousness that we all have around our awareness to the built environment, right? To be able to ask ourselves questions like, why are there trees in this neighborhood but not in my neighborhood?
Hmm.
And like, what does that do to my psychology? What does that do to the ways that I value myself or value my community, right? I'm far more likely to throw trash on the ground in a neighborhood that has broken sidewalks and no trees and blighted properties than I am like walking down a beautifully, manicured street with trees. And it's like there's a different experience there, right? Our built environment tells us about what we care about, right?
Hmm.
Architecture is our society's way of demonstrating what we value, right? When
Hmm.
we build affordable housing, we value housing. When we only build market rate housing, we value capital. And so how do we encourage people to develop and cultivate relationships with the built environment, with the natural environment, right? Like we live here. So like how are we engaging with it? A large part of my work is really just purely just around that, right? Like what can I do as an artist? How can I document neighborhoods, communities, people in ways that can put some of these things in conversation with one another and encourage some of that questioning? A lot of this work is just driven and motivated by just observation and the power of observation, like the power in noticing,
Yeah.
right? Like noticing is such an important part of our human existence, and we are constantly in a battle uh, with other forces that are trying to strip away how much we notice,
Yeah.
right? Whether
Yeah.
it's just by keeping us occupied by scrolling, whether it's the ads, right? It's like there's an intention for you to not pay attention to the things that really matter,
Hmm.
um, which is possible because we're not engaged in these sort of like daily conversations with our physical surroundings as much as we once used to be, right? And then here at UTO now, I think the ways in which I'm thinking about breaking generational cycles is really about how do we move beyond noticing to actually imagining,
Mm.
right? And what does that what do we start what do we notice that's new when we begin to imagine differently? And in my particular role, like I'll use one example since we've been talking about the housing projects that I grew up in. I hope I'm not jinxing myself or jinxing our team, but just to say like we are we are in the running, if you will, to potentially lead the master planning of that housing project that I grew up in. And whether we get the project or not, it's like that's another conversation. But I was able to sort of help develop the sort of like framing and kind of like uh a concept and sort of like approach, if you will, to the site in terms of like, these sorts of spaces, right? Like housing that allows for these activities, housing that allows for this kind of connection, housing that allows people to sort of grow into place and age in place in different ways, right? Just some of the things that I noticed, right? And so for me now, the questions are a little bit bigger in scale in that sense, right? Where I'm really thinking about like what is required for us to actually seed and cultivate and nourish the ecosystems and environments that we know in our being, in our spirit, are necessary for us and the folks that we serve, right? For us collectively to be able to live the lives that we think are possible.
Yeah.
And I'm always like motivated by this idea of like uh what would happen if like the entirety of the global population was like in alignment, right? Where like if our frequencies were all tapped in,
Uh,
what it what is possible in that world, right?
dream.
And we're only able to we're only we'll only be able to arrive there if we're creating environments that are like nourishing, right? And
Right.
are fulfilling. I'm trying to ask these sort of bigger questions, right? Of like what is the intention of a project? What are we doing to allow for people to not just exist, but to be in conversation with their environment in a different way? How do we transform and change just like the relationships that people have to place by creating different relationships with place, right? And giving people the opportunity to get their hands in the dirt, right? Like, what does it mean for us to think about a housing project that like actually allows and makes space for people to literally plant things, right? And like
Mm,
sow the earth, right? Like,
yeah.
how do we change our approaches to design and planning, in ways that are about control,
Mm,
which I feel like is a lot of like what our discipline unfortunately kind of has become, right? It's like, how
mm,
do we control the way that people move through space? How
mm-hmm.
do we guide people? It's like, well, like, what if we didn't have control and we just like let people choose? Like, what joy is possible there?
Creating like a blank canvas of a
You know?
space.
Yeah, and how do we transfer agency, you know?
Yeah.
Or just allow for agency, right? Not even transfer it, just allow for it, right?
Right.
I'm still very much trying to understand the landscape of this profession and this discipline in this particular place and time, right? Like being in Boston in this particular moment, both socially, politically, environmentally, right? Like all of these things. I'm still trying to figure out what are the questions that Boston is trying to ask in a lot of ways before I start asking some of my own questions.
Mm,
And that's again, that goes back to this sort of like exploration and sort of dialogue between people, place, and time, right? And trying to understand like which variable or like which piece of that puzzle I'm learning from, and the time piece is often like the hardest, right? Because like we just want to get there faster than we always know is possible. And so I'm trying to let this place just like uh have its time with me, if you will, and um kind of guide some conversations in that sense.
I'm noticing a parallel between your approach to parenting and your approach to this design process, which is it seems like you're tapping into the other person before you make a judgment call on what is best for them. So with your daughter,
Uh-huh.
you're like, hey, who are you, human? What are you about? How can I best cultivate the best for you
Uh-huh.
instead of the best of what I think for you? And with in terms of Boston, what is Boston requiring and asking of me instead of what I think Boston needs? So you're doing a lot of listening before you're jumping into action. How can someone practice that listening or that observing, if you will? Like what can we do to exercise that muscle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of speaks to like my the realities of like just inherently being born a photographer, right? Like that's just like it was in my cards somewhere. I try to notice little things, right? Like I think just building a practice of trying to notice something different every day, right? Like even if it's like the littlest thing, like I noticed this crack on the sidewalk, that leads to like I looked up and I noticed this bird that was flying by, which like made me ask questions about like where is this bird coming from? Where is this bird going? Why was it just one bird?
Right.
It's like allowing presence to teach you, right? And being like humble enough and curious enough to just sit in that space without having to like formulate a thought. It's just like it just purely is just like observance for the sake of gratitude of like existing, right? It's like I get to exist in this moment where I can notice that crack on the sidewalk,
Ooh.
right? Like I get to exist in this moment where I can see this like beautiful interaction between a grandmother and their grandchild on the train on my way to work, right? Just like these little moments that over time you start to kind of understand sort of the deeper rhythms and feeling and sort of texture of people and places, right? And then when I am in environments with people, it's been said many a times that I'm like someone who will be very quiet in the room. But when I have something to say, it's like I'm speaking because I really genuinely feel like it's something beyond just a response, right? Like, and so I think just practicing it on those small scales, and it's easy, like something, even just starting with yourself, right? Like, what do you notice when you look in the mirror?
Hmm.
First thing in the morning, right? Like, what do you see? And just going from there. I mean, there's a great newsletter out there in the world. There's this gentleman, I'm blanking on his name right now, who actually, I can't remember where he's from originally, but I think he resides in the New Orleans area now. But he has a newsletter called The Art of Noticing. I think it's what it's called. And he sends out like kind of like daily or like weekly kind of like little exercises, like keep count of how many fire hydrants you walk by, or like little things like that, like that you can just sort of weave into your like daily walking and ritual. And I think that those like little exercises, as like irrelevant as they might seem, again, it's about building the muscle memory between like what you notice and what you feel.
Hmm.
Right. And for
Hmm.
me, like that's the space that I want to live in all the time when I'm a photographer, right? Like I want to be able to create a visual record, not of what I see in the moment, but what I'm feeling and experiencing, and like what is the visual representation of that I have access to right now
Yeah.
in this environment, so that I can communicate that thing, right? And I think it's an important skill for all of us to have, right? Certainly as photographers or artists, but I think for everyone, because it's about training your body to know where to look when you
Mm.
feel that thing, you
Mm.
know?
Can you speak more on that?
Yeah, so for, like I'll keep on the photography train for, since it seems relevant, but sometimes there are photos that I don't take in a moment, but I feel them and I'm looking for it, right? And part of building that muscle memory is like, okay, next time I feel that thing, like, say I'm photographing a wedding, right? It's like, next time I feel that thing, whatever it was, it's like, I kind of have a good sense of like where in the crowd I should look towards to be able to communicate with that energy, if you will. And you know, it doesn't happen all the time, right? It's like it doesn't always line up. Sometimes it's like you miss the moment from time to time. That's part of it. And being comfortable with that is a lesson that I learned early on, right? It's like if I'm too focused on missing the moment, I might actually miss the moment that I'm supposed to get. And so you learn from that, but it's just like muscle memory where it becomes where you look towards becomes instinctual, and it's because you're responding to those vibrations, to those energies that are surrounding you. You're trying to like tune your dial to that frequency, right? To pick it up. So you kind of know, you just know where to look. And it's like
Right.
it's hard to explain, right? Because it's like there isn't a uh it isn't always a like one-to-one direct corollary, or like sometimes you don't even know what the emotion is that you're feeling. It's just something that's being stirred up inside of you. But you get these signals, right? Of like, okay, like I'm looking for this expression, right? It's like I've shot a lot of like music, like a lot of like music and concerts and sort of like events in that sense. And sometimes like, especially with songs that you're familiar with or artists that you're familiar with, like when there's a certain kind of like emotional moment or like word or phrase in a song, and you know what that stirs up for you. It's like now when you scan the crowd, you're like trying to find someone who's maybe articulating with their facial expressions, with their eyes, with their body language, articulating that they're also feeling that thing, right?
Hmm.
And that's like, it's so much more powerful to document those moments where you know that there's a sort of shared or collective experience than to try to just like force a photograph of like something that you see.
Yeah, yeah. I'm noticing or I'm sensing a connection between noticing within ourselves, noticing within other people and within environments. I'm sensing the connection between that noticing and alignment, which can lead to a bigger story of peace. So if something feels off, then it might not be in alignment and it's probably not the best path to peace. Or on the opposite
Mhm.
side, if something feels great, there's just a great energy to it, you follow that same path and that can lead you to internal peace, maybe even bigger peace within a society or a
Mhm.
community. It makes me want to go out and count fire hydrants now. Yeah, when you get the name of that newsletter, send it over. I want to keep that. I want to add that to the show notes for everybody. So if a listener is interested, it'll be right there.
Yeah, he also has a book about it too, I think. But yeah, it's a great resource. And yeah, I think your comment about like finding that path towards peace uh is spot on. It's something that I think about often, particularly like within my creative practice, right? Like I think I'm like of the belief that all of us have been to the places that we're supposed to go. Like that is encoded in our DNA, encoded in our spirit, right? Like we've already been to the destination. And so much about life is about listening to these energies and vibrations and the rhythms around us to just kind of guide us and sort of like make sure that we are staying on this path that again we already are familiar with internally, spiritually. It's like truly wholeheartedly believe that, that like whatever I'm whatever is meant for you is like for you, right? And our jobs are less about living life to sort of carve a path and more about living life to try to stay as close to that path as possible. And when I'm shooting, it's like I'm really hyper aware of that, right? Like, I could be at an event with like a few hundred people and it's like there might just be a dozen people in that space that I like need to photograph. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And like
Yeah.
those photographs feel different, right? I often use this like metaphor of like, I feel like I've had this vision a while back where I was like walking down this long, narrow hallway. And at the end of it was this portrait of myself that was
Mm-hmm.
not completed, but it was made up of all these images that I've taken over time, right? So it's a sort of like collage, mosaic, if you will, of all the photos of people and places and kind of moments that I've experienced that sort of like made up that image. And like my goal as a photographer is to try to like accumulate as many of those puzzle pieces as possible before I get to the end of that hallway, so that by the time I get there, I can see as complete of a picture as possible of this being that is made up of everything else, right? And I'm like searching for those little nuggets when I'm engaging with people in place. And so much of that, like, it's not about me, right? Like, again, it's about just tuning in, and allowing that gut instinct, and that like ancestral wisdom that we carry to keep us on that path, on the path that we're already wired to be on.
Yeah.
But like, that's my piece right there. It's like trying to arrive at that portrait, as completed as possible. It's like that's the thing that gives me peace when I'm doing this work and trying to do this work from that particular place. It's like I'm trying to find there's a lot of beautiful images that I can take. I know that there's a lot of beautiful work that I can do, but like I'm trying to find those pieces.
Hmm. Mm. What a beautiful metaphor. I'm going to think about that. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. I love going deep and thinking about the bigger picture for ourselves, for our communities, our families, our businesses, whatever it is. It's so important to think about life zoomed out, but also zoomed all the way in. So thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about this. If someone wants to find you, where can they find you?
The easiest place is just on my website. If you're trying to connect virtually that way, it's just josecotto.com. I'm also Also on all the socials at JCCOTTO, trying to cultivate a better relationship with that part of my world. Taking quite a bit of a hiatus in recent times, etc. I tend to be accessible. And then if folks just want to, shoot me an old fashioned email, it's just hello@josecotto.com. And I'm trying to get into that habit more of just being a little bit more intentional and longer form communication, like let's actually have a conversation, and not exchange hearts on a screen, but how can we actually connect and truly sync up in a meaningful and fruitful way.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so, so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us on Bringing Up Business. If you could, please take a moment to subscribe to and rate the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at bub.podcast. That's BUB.podcast. Finally, we'd love to get your feedback. If you have a comment or a guest idea, please let us know on our website, bringingupbusiness.com. Until next time, thanks for joining us. Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Say bye-bye. See you later.
Bye-bye. See you later.
This recording is for informational purposes only and should not be considered business advice. Opinions expressed are as of the date of recording and are subject to change without notice. The views and opinions of guests on this program are not necessarily those of Umari Digital and its affiliates, which together we refer to as Umari Digital. Umari Digital is not affiliated with guests or their business affiliates unless otherwise stated. Umari Digital does not guarantee the accuracy or the completeness of the data presented herein. This recording is for informational purposes only, and the information, data, analysis, or opinion it includes or their use should not be considered business, financial, or legal advice. Umari Digital shall not be responsible for any decisions, damages, or other losses resulting from or related to the information, data, analysis, or opinions or their use. All business decisions are subject to risk, including possible loss of capital. Individuals should seriously consider if a decision is suitable for them by referencing their own financial position. Thank you.